Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A mobile vaccination clinic at an Alberta-Montana border crossing has been shut down by the federal government. We have reaction. Thousands of students across Alberta return to their classrooms, except for one area of the province where COVID-19 case counts are still quite high. And the U.S. Secretary of State is headed to the Middle East to lay the groundwork for more peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. An official with the Blackfeet tribe in Montana says the vaccination clinics at the Canada-U.S. border have come to an end. The Blackfeet began offering Pfizer and Moderna shots at the Carway border crossing about a month ago, initially for members of the Blackfoot Confederacy, but then later for anyone who wanted them. There were around 1,350 doses dished out. Border agents said Canadians attempting to drive across the American border now solely for the COVID-19 shot will be turned away. The Public Health Agency of Canada also clarified that any Canadians traveling to the U.S. to receive a vaccine shot are not exempted from a 14-day quarantine upon their return. Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder joins me now to discuss the closure of the mobile vaccine clinic at the Carway border crossing. Rachel, why would the government shut it down if the Blackfeet tribe is willing to offer the help which is needed the most?
Why would this happen? You have extra vaccines that need to be used. They have a certain lifespan. If they're not used within that lifespan, they're going to have to be discarded, which means they become waste. Why wouldn't the Canadian government allow for individuals to go across the border, get their vaccination, sit there for 15 minutes, make sure they're good to go, and then return to Canada? I mean, this is what's been happening for weeks now, and people have proven that they're able to do it safely. So the truth is, Hal, I don't have an answer for you, but I certainly have lots of good questions, and I think Canadians do too. And that is, of course, if these vaccines are available, why would the Canadian government want to prevent individuals from being able to access them?
So what are your thoughts on the way the Trudeau Liberals have handled the vaccine rollout to Canadians?
You know, I think the overall framework with regard to vaccine rollouts has been a disaster from the beginning. Promises that vaccines were coming and then nope, they're not. And then promised that a certain number was coming and then nope, there's a reduction in number. And some of this was avoidable. Some of this was preventable. And of course, that was left up to the Prime Minister and Minister Anand, who is responsible for procurement. They should have been able to negotiate better. And so then that would have allowed for Canadians to be better served in this process. You know, I think another thing that is just worth highlighting here is as much as Canadians are being encouraged to seek out a vaccination, and by all means, every Canadian who desires to be vaccinated should have access. The other thing that should be highlighted, though, is Canadians don't yet know what they can or cannot do once they are fully vaccinated. So, you know, those who are in the United States, they have clear direction from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Canada doesn't have that. Canadians don't have that. And so I think they're really missing the confidence that they desire to go and to be vaccinated and then, you know, to be able to live their lives.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder. The province has so far just over 2.5 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have been administered in Alberta, including close to 355,000 who have been fully vaccinated with 2 doses. All Albertans are now eligible to book appointments through the AHS or at participating pharmacies. As for COVID-19 cases, they keep coming down. Over the last 24 hours, just 387 new cases were identified. There are currently 565 people in hospital with the virus, including 158 in intensive care. There are just over 12,000 total cases in the province. Fortunately, close to 211,000 Albertans have now fully recovered from COVID-19, including over 11,000 here in the South Zone. Police in Fort Macleod are investigating the suspicious death of an adult male. Around 2:30 a.m. Monday morning, RCMP responded to a report of an injured man at a residence in Fort Macleod. When they arrived, the male had already passed away. An autopsy to determine the cause of death will be performed in Calgary later this week. RCMP is looking for any dash camera footage or video surveillance of any activity on First Avenue early Monday morning. If you can help police with their investigation, you're asked to call Fort Macleod RCMP right away at 403-553-4406. A Central Alberta man is dead following an incident involving RCMP at the Red Deer Regional Hospital. Police say they received multiple driving complaints, and when they stopped the driver of a vehicle located inside of the parkade of the hospital, a confrontation ensued with police. That's when the driver was shot and killed by a police officer. The Alberta Serious Incident Response Team has been brought in to investigate the matter. Alberta's Advanced Education Minister says universities in our province should pause or not renew partnerships with organizations linked with China or the Chinese Communist Party. Demetrius Nicolaides says he's deeply concerned about the potential theft of Canadian intellectual property. He says he's also worried that research partnerships with China may be used by Chinese military and intelligence agencies. Nicolaides has asked universities to review their relationships that are linked with China and its governing party and submit reports within 90 days. Many of Alberta's students have returned to their classrooms today. Kindergarten through grade 12 students have been learning online since May 7th when the province ordered they be sent home as the province dealt with surging COVID-19 cases. Thousands of students in higher grades in Calgary and Edmonton had already been working from home. Students in the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, which includes Fort McMurray, will continue learning from home until at least May 31st as case rates remain high. The Lethbridge College Kodiak's women's volleyball team has signed a local product. Claire Talbot grew up in Lethbridge and most recently played for the Coaldale Panthers Volleyball Club before the season was cut short due to the pandemic. A multi-sport athlete, Talbot is excited to play for a team she grew up watching.
Obviously, I've grown up watching the Kodiak's teams, and I always wanted to be on that court playing. And then seeing my family and friends in the stands was always a goal of mine. It means a lot to me actually to be recognized by this team because there are so many great athletes in the city and they all have great potential. And knowing that I was one of them that were recognized for this position was awesome. And it's super great to be staying here. It saves money. And I just am supported by everyone who I've grown up with. And then just playing the sport I love in front of the people I know is just awesome.
The Alberta Colleges Athletic Conference recently gave Lethbridge College the permission to draft athletic schedules for the upcoming season. Many organizations have had to pivot to find new creative ways to generate funding during the pandemic. Lethbridge Family Services has partnered with GPS Container Depots to start a community bottle drive to raise money for the organization. The executive director of the organization, Maral Kiani Terry, says the pandemic has hit them very hard and they haven't been able to recover funds from previous community fundraising events.
At Family Center, we normally have large fundraising events that happen in March. We have our gala and we have a few other events that happen. And of course, with the pandemic, we're not able to gather. We're not able to do those fundraising events to be able to support our operations and sort of fill those gaps where we may not have funding or funders. Last year, we that was our first year having a bottle drive, and it was a huge success with the support of the community. And with that success, we decided to run that again this year.
You can drop off your bottles at the Lethbridge Family Center location in the west at Coalbanks Boulevard or at either GPS Container Depot location. Lethbridge City Council is considering a resolution being brought forward by the harm reduction advocacy group Moms Stop the Harm. On Wednesday, the group will be asking for the city's support that a national state of emergency be declared around the opioid crisis. They want city officials to reach out to the federal government to ask for a safe supply of narcotics to those addicted to drugs and for the eventual decriminalization of narcotics for personal use in Canada. As of May 17th, 37 municipalities have passed part of a resolution calling on Ottawa to decriminalize certain drugs. When it comes to helping people financially and spiritually, there are some solid Christian organizations who are out there. Lance Wood is an accountant and author of the book $4.83, The Cost to Impact the Life of a Child for a Year. Lance has some tips for us when it comes to getting ahead financially. He says when you focus on Christ while microfinancing your family, the return on investment can be huge.
The concept is that Christ-centered microfinance, which some of you may be familiar with, is the idea that you give a family an opportunity, a little loan to start a business or put them in a savings group where they begin to accumulate some wealth. And it's through that loan that they pull themselves out of poverty, both spiritual and material poverty. And when you pull the family out of poverty, they help their kids.
Lance Wood will also discuss the value of work and why handouts are not always the best idea. That interview is coming up later in our newscast. Today marks the end of the Second Battle of Ypres during the First World War in 1915. The fight raged on for over a month, with more than 6,500 Canadians killed, injured, or captured. It was also the first time that the German military introduced chemical warfare into the battle, hitting the Allies with chlorine gas. As Micah Quinn explains now, a local military historian wants residents to remember what Canadians sacrificed for their country.
Glenn Miller is a volunteer for the Lethbridge Military Museum, and he says many Canadians who came back after suffering an injury due to chlorine gas died because of it.
It was their first time really at the front as well, having been raised in Canada, and then really shipped over after initial training, and they didn't have any experience with that before, but they held their ground while some others had retreated. And so they were responsible for a small area, and now all of a sudden, because some of the people had withdrawn or died, they had a larger area to hold the ground against the Germans.
Miller says he's been to the Menin Gate in Belgium, where they conduct a ceremony every day at 8 p.m. to honor those who lost their lives.
As a tribute to all who have fallen, and they play with the bugle Last Post. And on that monument, there's a number of thousands of names from the Commonwealth who are engraved, and Canada has a whole section of panels for all those who don't have a marker or a grave in Belgium that is known.
Canadian soldiers stood their ground, and they were known and respected for it. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
When it comes to a healthy marriage, most men want to be their wife's hero. That's according to marriage coach Brent Taylor, who's also author of the book, Hers Greatest Need. Mr. Taylor says one of the great needs for a man today is significance.
He wants to be his wife's hero. There's not a man in the world that doesn't want to be his wife's hero. He might suck at it, but he wants to be. Because every little boy knows, do I got what it takes? Right? And there's not a woman in the world that doesn't want to be fought for. So if she's going to be fought for, who's going to be the one who fights for her? Her hero. It all boils down to God's design. He's our hero, and he asks husbands to love their wives like Christ loved the church.
Marriage coach Brent Taylor will also talk about how a strong marriage is essential in raising kids. That interview with Jeanette Roche is coming up in the second half of our program. Ottawa announced it will be sending health workers to Manitoba as it grapples with high COVID-19 rates and overburdened intensive care units. The federal government says it will also provide medical staff through the Canadian Red Cross and military help. It is also prepared to deploy epidemiologists and lab technicians. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister asked for help after speaking with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Friday. The Manitoba government is extending public health orders aimed at curbing the spread of COVID-19. Officials say with case numbers surging, rules on public gatherings will be kept in place until at least the end of the week.
Indoor public gatherings are not permitted, and visitors are not permitted on private property except in certain circumstances. Outdoor gatherings with anyone from outside a household are not allowed, and that applies to all recreation spaces, playgrounds, golf courses, parks, sports fields. Only can gather with members of your household.
Meanwhile, in Saskatchewan, the province there says it has reached the Step 2 threshold on the province's reopening roadmap, with over 70% of those 30 or older receiving their first COVID-19 vaccine dose. Beginning June 20th, capacity thresholds on retail, personal care services, restaurants and bars will be eased. 15 people will be allowed at private gatherings, and 150 people will be permitted at public indoor gatherings. Now that'll take place 3 weeks after Step 1 restrictions are lifted on May the 30th. Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says the Liberals need to do something to try and stop the surging inflation rate, which is at a 10-year high, making everything more expensive. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government is putting programs in place to support Canadians, including lowering taxes on the middle class and increasing them for the wealthiest.
Mr. Speaker, everything is getting more expensive under this Liberal government, and now we have the proof. Last month, inflation powered through the government's target to a 10-year high. Lumber is more expensive, houses are more expensive, food is more expensive, life is more expensive. How much more is this government's economic failure going to cost Canadian families?
Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of this pandemic, we made a simple promise to Canadians, that we'd have your backs, however long it took, whatever it took. And that's exactly what we did. By supporting Canadians right away who lost their jobs because of this pandemic with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, by supporting small businesses across the country with things like the wage subsidy and the Canada Emergency Business Account, we have been there to support Canadians through this difficult time. And we've seen, Mr. Speaker, our economy bounce back quicker than other economies around the world because we've been there to support. We will continue to be.
4 people were killed in a shooting at an apartment complex in West Jefferson, Ohio. Police say 3 of the victims were found inside of the apartment and 1 was located outside. Their names have not been released and no other injuries were reported. It is unclear what prompted the shooting, one of at least 3 fatal shootings in the state in as many days. A 16-year-old was killed and 5 other teens were injured at a park on Saturday. And at a shooting at a bar in Youngstown, Ohio, left 3 dead and 3 others injured early Sunday morning. Police are still searching for suspects in that case. Firefighters in California are battling a wildfire in the Santa Ana River bottom in Riverside County, located east of Los Angeles. Local reports say evacuations have been ordered in the area as around 100 acres of dry brush are currently burning. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is heading to the Middle East to press the Israelis and Palestinians to build on last week's Gaza ceasefire by laying the groundwork for an eventual resumption in long-stalled peace talks.
One of the main reasons that Blinken is going now to Israel, to the West Bank, to Jordan, and to Egypt is to try to make sure that that ceasefire holds. That is the most immediate goal. The second most immediate goal for the administration is to get much needed humanitarian assistance and reconstruction money into Gaza to rebuild the civilian infrastructure that was destroyed in the Israeli airstrikes, which of course were a response to the thousands of rockets that were fired by Hamas from Gaza into Israel itself.
Closer to home, despite Ontario's ongoing stay-at-home order, hundreds of Ottawa area residents flocked to the Westboro Beach on Victoria Day to enjoy the balmy weather. Everybody's outside having a good time. Many parts of southern and central Ontario have been enjoying the weather in the high 20s and low 30s. Wow. Not exactly beach weather at the lakes here in southwestern Alberta over the long weekend. We had quite a bit of moisture lately with cooler temperatures, but that trend will be changing soon. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. We had a soggy long weekend, but fortunately we should be seeing a break from the rain very soon. Jeanette Rocher is here now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, the rain should be tapering off and we'll begin seeing a little more sunshine and warmer temperatures.
Yeah, well, we still have to get through the 30% chance of showers tomorrow on Wednesday and a risk of an afternoon thunderstorm tomorrow as well. 16-degree our high before we get into that nicer weather on Thursday. Look at that, lots of sunshine. 24 degrees will be our high. And then on Friday, again, we're looking at rain. So a 60% chance both Friday into Friday night, high of 16 that day. 17 on a Saturday with a mix of sun and cloud before we get into a nicer day on a Sunday. Lots of sunshine, 23 degrees. And then into next Monday, we're looking again at the 27-degree mark with lots of sunshine. So we got to get through a couple more rainy days with intermittent nice sunshine in 20s. So it's a little bit all over the place. Average high for this time of year, 20 degrees. Average low, 6 degrees. 29 was our high temperature on this day back in 1983. And in 1955, we had our chilliest on record, which was -1. 5:35 is when the sun rose this morning and our sunset this evening. 9:22 p.m. is giving us a nice long day of sunshine. Over on the west coast in Victoria, we're looking at mainly overcast skies tomorrow. 15 degrees the high tomorrow, 16 the high in Vancouver. Now there is a low pressure system coming in through the south coast that could bring quite a bit of rain later on this week in the Vancouver metro area. 18 degrees the high in Edmonton tomorrow and 16 the high in Calgary. Calgary looking very similar to Lethbridge with that 30% chance of showers, risk of an afternoon thunderstorm as well. Over in Saskatoon, 14 degrees the high, mix of sun and cloud, 13 the high in Regina, 20k winds for both of those cities, 9 degrees the high over in Winnipeg with a mix of sun and clouds, same thing there, 20 km/h winds. Over in Toronto and Ottawa, we're looking at a 70% chance of showers tomorrow with a risk of a thunderstorm as well, 22 the high in Toronto, 28 the high in Ottawa. Humid though, we're looking at humidexes of about 34, especially in Montreal. Montreal also experiencing lots of rain tomorrow as well. Same thing here. Fredericton looking at a 30% chance of showers, risk of a thunderstorm. 28 the high though, 22 the high in Halifax, 24 in Charlottetown. Looking at rain tomorrow as well. Same thing for St. John's, Newfoundland. 14 degrees, rain and a bit windy as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
More airwaves are being set aside for 5G cellular technology as the Canadian government says it will auction off a repurposed wireless spectrum band. The Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development said the 3,800 megahertz band is key for 5G. Officials say that is why it's being repurposed from its previous use with satellite and wireless broadband services. An auction for the band is scheduled to take place in 2023. Another key spectrum band, 3,500, will be auctioned off on June the 15th. Saputo has announced 2 acquisitions in the dairy alternatives and value-added ingredient sectors. The Montreal-based dairy processor and cheese manufacturer says the deals are worth a combined $187 million. Scottish-based Butte Island Foods makes vegan cheese, while Reedsburg facility in Wisconsin makes value-added ingredients including organic lactose and goat whey. Saputo company officials say the acquisition of Butte Island Foods reflects the company's commitment to expanding its footprint in the dairy alternative space. U.S. President Joe Biden has signed into law legislation that opens the door for resumed cruise ship travel to Alaska after the pandemic last year scrapped cruises. The measure will allow large cruise ships to sail directly from Washington State to Alaska without stopping in Canada. It is intended as a temporary workaround of a long-standing federal law that requires large cruise ships bound for Alaska to stop in our country. Amid COVID concerns, Canada has banned cruise ship operations through February. Members of Alaska's congressional delegation pushed for the workaround. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 36 points on the day to finish at 19,564. The Dow was down 81 points to 34,312. The S&P 500 was down 8 points to 4188, and the Nasdaq was down 4 points on the day to 13,657. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 2 cents to 66.07 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to 291 US. Gold was down 22 cents to 18.9903 US an ounce, and silver was even at $28 US an ounce. Wheat is at $330 per metric ton, barley's at $335, the November futures for canola is at $6.97, and corn is at $392 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 3 cents to $116.73, feeder cattle were up 35 cents to $136.63, and lean hogs were up $1.90 to $115.25. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 82.87 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, an official with the Blackfeet tribe in Montana says the vaccination clinics at the Canada-US border have come to an end. The Blackfeet began offering Pfizer and Moderna shots at the Carway border crossing a month ago, initially for members of the Blackfoot Confederacy, but then later for anyone who wanted them. There were around 1,350 doses dished out. Border agents said Canadians attempting to drive across the American border now solely for the COVID-19 shot will be turned away. So what is the best way for managing your finances during a pandemic, especially when there isn't a lot of income available as there used to be? Accountant and author Lance Wood has some tips for us, and he'll join us with his thoughts in just a moment. COVID-19 has affected so many of us, physically, financially, spiritually, and mentally, but it has also had a major real impact on the world's poor. A number of Christian organizations are doing some great work to help people financially during difficult times, including through microfinance. We're going to learn how this works in just a moment, and how you can get involved to make a difference as well. Joining us today to talk about this is Lance Wood. He's a business person and co-author of the book, $4.83, The Cost to Impact the Life of a Child for a Year, Maybe Forever. Welcome to Bridge City News, Lance.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Hal.
So how did you come up with that title? And that's quite the long title as well of a book, $4.83.
It is a long
exactly
title,
does it mean?
but the point is the number, $4.83. The concept is that Christ-centered microfinance, which some of you may be familiar with, is the idea that you give a family an opportunity, a little loan to start a business or put them in a savings group where they begin to accumulate some wealth. And it's through that loan that they pull themselves out of poverty, both spiritual and material poverty. And when you pull the family out of poverty, they help their kids. And so in Christ-centered microfinance, it costs about $20 to help a family for a year, to get a little business and to help them out of poverty. And when you divide the 20 by the number of people in the family, average of 4, it works out to be $4.83 based on some financial statements that we reviewed of one of the organizations.
Wow. Now, Lance, talking about giving money sometimes makes people a little uncomfortable. Why do you think the Bible mentions money or possessions more than 2,000 times?
Because money impacts our hearts, right? I mean, what happens is the Bible talks about where your heart is, your treasure is also. And where your treasure is, your heart is also. And so the point is that the way we hold money, either tightly or with open hands, affects our relationship with Jesus.
Now, can you give us a bit of a layman's idea of what you mean by microfinance?
Yeah, again, it's the concept. I'll just give you an example. The way that it works is an organization goes to a little community and they don't know anybody, but they know that everybody knows everybody in the community, and they say, we're here to help. We're here to help you get a little business, and we don't know you, but we know that you know each other, so we're going to put you in groups of 5. And be careful who you allow into your group of 5, because you're going to cross guarantee each other's loans. So if one person doesn't pay, the others have to pay. So what starts out as a business transaction creates this group of 5 because they pick carefully. And they then make the loans. Everybody gets their businesses. How maybe you get chickens and you're selling eggs. I buy the equipment for a little oven and make bread. Well, I buy all my eggs from you. You buy all your bread from me. Out of nothing, we create a little business community. And we're meeting every 2 weeks to repay loans, to study the Bible, to see what the Bible says about doing business with integrity and honest, and to learn about Jesus. And what happens is, out of nothing, and I just want to stop here. The World Bank interviewed people in poverty, and they just asked them, what's going on? And they said, we feel humiliated, we feel isolated, we feel inferior, we feel ashamed, we feel disconnected, we feel hopeless, we have fear. Well, what happens when they put this little community together, that now they've all got little businesses, they all are meeting weekly or bi-weekly, they're taking care of each other, they're studying the Word of God, all that stuff changes. It's not just about the money. What happens is they pull themselves out of poverty, including now they no longer feel inferior. Now they no longer are afraid. Now they aren't isolated. They aren't depressed, and they have hope. So this financial tool winds up creating an amazing effect on people's lives.
All that talk of chicken, now I'm kind of craving a little bit of fried chicken and maybe some fried eggs at the same time here.
There
now,
you
Lance,
go.
Your book delves into different ways the kids win through microfinance. What are some of those ways specifically, and how can they really make a difference?
Yeah, great. And so the point is, when people think of Christ-centered microfinance, they think of the parents being helped, but there's tons of research, and just as intuitive, that when the parents get help, they pull their kids out of poverty with them, and the family thrives. So some of the things are food, right? Instead of 1 meal a day, now 2. Instead of no clothes or no shoes, clothes and shoes. Instead, housing, education, healthcare, modeling that work is valuable. And also they grow spiritually, because as their parents grow spiritually, they move towards the church and move towards Jesus.
Now, you talk a lot about work and the value of work and why it may be a bad idea to just give handouts, which a lot of governments have been doing during the pandemic. Why are you putting so much value on work?
Hal, there's a great book about this written by Bob Lupton. It's called Toxic Charity. And what it says is, the first time somebody gets a handout, they appreciate it. And the second time, they anticipate it. And the third time, they feel they expect it. And the fourth time, they feel entitled. And the fifth time, it creates dependency. And it wrecks people's lives, because God made us to work and to value work and to have the dignity of valuing work. And so that's the way God made us. That's the way Christ-centered microfinance does it. The people never get given anything. All they get is an opportunity, like, frankly, me and you were born with.
You know, my father, he instilled that hard work ethic in me. My father was a baby boomer, may he rest in peace. And you're right, it rubbed off on me. He raised me that way, and nothing comes for free. And that phone's not going to ring off the hook. You got to be assertive, get out there, be aggressive, and work hard for everything you get. Now, Lance, how are the strength and stability of the family, speaking of like mums and dads here, a key indicator of a society's health?
I like the way you say that, mums and dads. But God made the family to be an institution, and it absolutely is true. We see it all around the developing world, and we see it in our world, that when the family breaks down, society falls apart. God just made it that way. It's true there, it's true here. And we see that in people in poverty, that when the families thrive, the kids thrive, and the cycle of poverty is broken.
Now, you're right that poverty affects every part of the human experience. In what way specifically?
Oh, I mentioned that World Bank study that said people in poverty, they feel inferior, they feel ashamed. I think, oh, they don't have any money or they need a job. That's just a part of it. It's everything. It's what they say, we feel oppressed and depressed. But I think one of the biggest things, they feel isolated from each other and isolated from God. Poverty is it's a blanket over you that holds you down.
Lance, the availability of affordable housing is an issue all around the world, even here in Lethbridge, where we have a real homeless problem, and trying to get affordable housing for young people and for seniors as well, for that matter. What is the answer to homelessness, even in first world countries?
I'm not sure that I'm the person to answer that, but let me just say, from my experience around seeing people in absolute poverty, having ownership and having hope and being able to look to the future changes something. And as they begin to work for themselves, they can begin to put a roof over their heads and ultimately own a home.
Now, explain what you mean by the terms short-term thinking or survival thinking.
Yeah, and this is a trap, right? When there's a crisis, you get stuck in crisis. You've got to have relief from the outside. And personally, that's when I believe it's appropriate to have relief and gift. When it's a trap, it's a crisis, it's an immediate problem. But a person can't be in that forever. They have to have an avenue to begin to look forward and to begin to hope and to begin to move out of poverty. And again, that's what Christ-centered microfinance does. Another type of Christ-centered microfinance, I talked about a loan, but actually is a savings group where you cause people to come together and everybody just puts in 25 cents. And it's amazing that just doing that, and then they loan the money out to each other to start little businesses, just doing that takes the focus off of, I'm going to survive for another day and I'm just going to spend everything I get and hope I can eat, to now people start looking to the future and start moving and saving. And it's just amazing.
You know, some people, Lance, actually have a bit of an issue with the term in the Bible, it's better to give than to receive, especially during the pandemic when so many families are hurting. They find it might be even harder to give. But what you're trying to tell me right now is that it's still important to give even during the dark times.
Oh my gosh, if there ever was a time, I think God made us for this, right? It's like Esther, if this is your time. And there's opportunity. It's God's plan that's unfolding right now. And I believe I believe you are called to be a part of it. What is your role? Can you hear God's voice? And how can you step in? And maybe Christ-centered microfinance isn't God's plan for you, but I tell you what, whatever it is, lean in now, listen for God's voice and step forward. It's been such a blessing in my life.
Listen to that still small voice. And sometimes it's a powerful voice too, like hits you like a ton of bricks over the head. So God has subtle ways and very powerful ways of reaching our hearts, definitely. Lance, describe what you mean by a holistic approach to poverty.
Yeah, that's great, Hal. So it's easy to just give somebody something when you see them in poverty. It's a lot harder to help break the destructive cycle of poverty in their life. So a holistic approach, to me, I care about the person's material well-being on this earth, and I also care equally, if not more, about their spiritual well-being. And a holistic approach, which is what Christ-centered microfinance is, addresses both at the same time. The people pull themselves out of poverty with dignity and with Jesus.
Now, you end your book by giving us some ideas about how we can help Can you share some of those with us?
Oh, I would love that. Thank you. So this is a message, right? I'm not even a charity. I have a website. It's called kids-win.com, and you can go there and you can see we're starting a campaign to try to help 100,000 kids, and you'll be able to give $4.83, and that won't ever go to me. That will go to multiple 501c3 charities that are helping kids through Christ-centered microfinance. And so I'm trying to just raise the bar, raise the awareness, cause people to understand. I'm an accountant. I'm a business guy. I can hardly believe that $4.83 can really change the life of a kid. And we have a big problem right now. 700 million people are in extreme poverty, underneath $1.90 a day a living, and 400 million of them are children. And UNICEF tells us that 3.5 million children a year will die of malnutrition and starvation, 10,000 kids a day. So the problem is huge. COVID has made it worse. As you can imagine, COVID hurt us, yes, but the people that are just living day to day, hand to mouth, it's killing them. It's killing them. And
yeah, we hear so much of the hardships in countries in Africa with a lot of families that are struggling. There's a lot of poverty, a lot of starvation, a lot of death in various countries. But you know what? It's also impacted us here in North America. We see a lot of cities where a lot of families, and there's a lot of starvation here in North America as well, Canada and the United States.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to answer your question about what can they do, go to our website, kids-win.com. You can get connected to somebody that's doing Christ-centered microfinance. You can learn more about it. You can read stories and see videos on our website, and you could buy the book and tell your friends. We're just trying to get the message out that this is a model that's working right now. It's amazing in terms of its impact for Giving Dollar, and we'd love for you to be a part of it.
One thing I want to ask you, Lance, before I let you go, what made you become an accountant?
I wanted to be rich. My dad was in business. I worked for a big firm. I worked for Arthur Andersen at first, and then PwC. I was a tax partner there, and I just could. I wanted the life, and I wanted to be wealthy.
And now?
And now God has put it on my heart to be in ministry full time and to give more and to be part of His unfolding plan.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for your time today, Lance. We really appreciate you joining us from Irvine, California.
Thanks, Hal. God bless you.
You too. Lance Wood is the co-author of the book, $4.83, The Cost to Impact the Life of a Child for a Year, Maybe Forever.
It's a topic we've been focusing on quite a bit lately, marital relationships, because they're challenging even in the best of times. But with the stress of COVID restrictions, it's put even more stress on marriage relationships. Today's guest says although there are different causes of relational breakdowns, there's one in particular that is the biggest issue, and we will chat about that today. Brent Taylor is a Lethbridge marriage coach and the author of Hers Greatest Need. Welcome, Brent, to Bridge City News. We're so glad to have you on today.
Thank you, Jeanette. I'm honored to be here. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. Okay, so can you briefly share a bit about what you do to help couples improve their relationships?
Well, I have a marriage builder program. I call it UCG. It includes my book, which is His and Hers Greatest Need, and the single biggest reason why marriages break down and how to build it up. And with that program, I've developed understanding, communication, and giving. And there's multiple elements within that program. It's either a 5-session or 8-session program, and it really helps restore marriages. So I've been doing that for a number of years.
Awesome. Now, this book is based upon some of your own personal experiences, right? So you yourself have gone through divorce and some tough times. Can you maybe give us a bit of your backstory?
Sure. Well, born and raised in Calgary, 1962, and moved around a few places and was married young, and have 3 awesome children. They're 34 and 32 and 28 and 3 grandchildren. And I worked about 25 years in the oil patch. And then I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was going to be somebody. And because I wanted to find somebody, because I felt, I guess I was rejected most of my marriage. Anyways, I raised $20 million and I built the largest manufacturing plant in Canada, in Lethbridge, actually in the county, BCT Structures. And I was on top of the world. I moved back to Lethbridge. I'd lived here before. And I was going somewhere, and I thought I'd find that amazing relationship that I was looking for. And I got it up to about 130 employees. It's a huge manufacturing plant making industrial accommodations for the oil patch primarily, the rig shacks and the camp shacks. And so I was just on top of the world. And I just loved the employees. I loved the whole business aspect. And then I lost it all. I was living with somebody here and I lost my $50 million company. And I had to be broken to be awoken. And then I remarried a few years later and I thought this was it. And I married somebody that had been badly beaten in her childhood. And I didn't realize, but I was husband number 5 and God still had to keep working on me. And about a year later, I never saw her again. And I looked up and I said, why, God, why? And he started to show me his and hers greatest need, the single biggest need, and the single biggest reason why marriages break down. So I started drawing my circles and I started taking jobs after about a year of writing my book and crying my eyes out, lots of tears. And then I started taking jobs and I started confirming and doing my research and surveying. And up to now, probably well over 11,000 people I've shared this with. Ministers in Calgary, ministers in Medicine Hat, Christians, non-Christians, Muslims, 82, 22, and every one of them has said, this is the greatest need, the greatest breakdown, but we didn't know it.
Wow.
So what I teach is not taught in the church, is not taught in the counselor's office. And roughly we have an 80% divorce rate in North America and much of the Western world. 69% of those divorces are being initiated by wives. Call it the walk-away wife syndrome. We tend to follow the sheep. And I think a lot of people don't realize the single biggest impact on a child's life is not your parenting. It's your marriage. And so
the parents' marriage. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're at an all-time high for mental health. Before COVID, we were.
Absolutely.
We had lots of issues around division and gender and depression and single parents, technology added to all that division. And we were just on a downhill slide, and especially in Alberta, because the oil patch went up like this, and then it went down like this. And there's a saying that says, a wife's loyalty is tested when her husband has nothing. And a husband's loyalty is tested when he has everything. And unfortunately, we make it about the money.
Now, Brent, you were mentioning that in your book, you talk about the biggest break. So tell me, what is the biggest breakdown that causes marriages to break down?
First, I have to give you the greatest need.
Okay, please do so.
Right? Because that need is not being filled.
Right.
And then the way it gets treated causes the single biggest breakdown.
Right.
So I'll verbally explain it. I normally draw circles. I can't talk too much unless I draw circles. But anyways, the greatest need for a man is significance. He wants to be his wife's hero. There's not a man in the world that doesn't want to be his wife's hero. He might suck at it, but he wants to be. Because every little boy knows, do I got what it takes? Right? And there's not a woman in the world that doesn't want to be fought for. So if she's going to be fought for, who's going to be the one who fights for her? Her hero. It all boils down to God's design. He's our hero. And he asks husbands to love their wives like Christ loved the church. So who's our hero? And so he wants to be our hero. So his greatest need is significance. And her greatest need is security, emotional and physical security. Yes, financial, but she'll take the emotional and physical security first.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Right. So in the beginning of the relationship, now I usually say the sex and the roses are great. He feels like number one, significance, and she's going to live happily ever after, security. And then she's trying to drag his butt over the white picket fence to responsibility land. And he says, it's not as fun over here as it used to be. And women, you also have to play over here where you met him. But here's where the big test comes. When the children start coming. When a man and woman are together just themselves, that intimacy they have, that oxytocin release, that chemical bonder, when they're physically intimate. Well, Mama Bear has that when she's birthing and nursing. He doesn't get what she's getting, and she doesn't get why he doesn't get what she's getting. So he feels like number 4. Every man feels insignificant to his wife when those children come. He used to be number 1, and now he's number 4. She doesn't understand because she's happy. She's living happily ever after. And she is bonded so closely with that child in her womb and as she's nursing. So those first couple of years, that bond is so tight, and she doesn't understand why he's feeling like number 4. And here's the breakdown. Every man, when he feels insignificant. So when I lost my $50 million company, when I lost my marriage, my daughter wouldn't speak to me for 6 months. I was nobody. And when a man feels like nobody, he retreats. He goes inside himself. It's a fear-based response. And fear stands for false evidence appearing real. He doesn't even know he's doing it. And when he retreats, he's trying to fill the void. He works more, he gambles more, he porns more, drinks more, plays around more. He's trying to fill the void because he wants to be his wife's hero.
Mm-hmm. So what are some ways that a wife can do that for her husband? How can she build this significance in her husband?
Right. So her security, I'll come to that in about 30 seconds here. Her
Okay.
security is threatened. When her security is threatened because he's retreating, she feels abandoned. Her autopilot fear-based response is not to retreat. She attacks or rejects him. She's trying to teach him a lesson, don't you abandon me, but it doesn't come out right as she's chucking the frying pan across the room. He takes it literally. She doesn't say what she means. She wants him to stay, not disengage, but he takes it literally and retreats some more. And then she feels more insecure, more abandonment, more attack and reject, and it goes around and around and around. So I tell men, when you're loving your children and picking up the vacuum and helping with the home and making date nights, you are loving your wife, because a woman's brain is very busy. She's about 15 to 20% busier than a guy's brain. Not inferior, superior, just busy. She's got lots of things on the go. He's more singularly focused. And then I say to wives, when you're loving your husband, you're loving your children. Because with those children, when they came along, the balance went out of whack. She was going to the children instead of to him. And he was going to her and she's going to the children. So now it's tilted. So to help put it back in balance, he needs to go to the children and she needs to go to her husband.
Okay, yeah, because in your book, you do write that when a woman is loving her husband, she's actually loving her children. And is that what you mean by that?
Yes, absolutely. She's putting that balance back in the family, because if you don't have your marriage, you don't have a family.
Yeah. So I know that you also mentioned that for women, their biggest needs is security. So what do you mean by that exactly? And when a wife isn't finding that sense of security, how does she, you're kind of mentioning some of her coping mechanisms that aren't necessarily good, and they could be contributing to the marital breakdown, right? It affects the relationship.
So she's looking for security, and she's also looking for maturity. That's what she's looking for in a husband, because that gives security. When she first gets married, she's not looking for a lover. She's looking for maturity. She's looking for somebody like her father, because she's actually leaving one man and being transferred to another man. And he's designed to protect and provide. So if you're a protector and a provider, you need to be mature. And that's because she needs security. Here's a classic example. Little Johnny's climbing an apple tree. He climbs halfway up and Mama Bear comes by and says, Johnny, you better be careful. You better get down from there. You're going to break a leg. She's worried about safety and security. God made woman so that she looks after those things. She uses the frontal part of her lobe more for safety and security than a man does for consequential thinking. That's the way she was designed. Papa Bear sees Johnny climbing a tree, says, Johnny, good job. If you can reach here and here, you can go higher. Significance, right?
Yeah.
Same thing if you go out in a strange city in a junky neighborhood and it's pitch black out, are you going to want to go outside by yourself, or are you going to want your husband, a friend, or a dog to go with you?
Right, of course. There we go with the security,
Most
right?
men will go out in the dark by themselves, and they're not too worried because men are more designed to take a risk.
True.
And they're designed to take a risk so that they can sacrifice their life for their wife and their children.
Interesting.
She wasn't designed for that.
Yeah, it's interesting how it all kind of comes back to those primal needs. So what are some ways that a husband can go about making his wife feel more secure? What can he do?
Well, there's a variety of things. I ask men to listen to their wife with their eyes and zip their lip. So if there's any men, guys, listen with your eyes and zip your lip.
I like that.
Because most men think, why are we talking unless we're solving a problem? Women think, well, why are we solving a problem? I just want you to listen. And here's what women don't even know. And when I share it with them, they go, yeah, that's it. Because the problem's not the problem. Men go, what do you mean the problem's not the problem? She wants to know that you care about how she feels about the problem. She wants you to listen to her heart. If you try to solve her problem or fix her problem, often women take it critically. He's not trying to criticize. That's how he loves. He loves solvingly and physically. Men's brains are wired more physically, testosterone, and solvingly, how things move and objects. So he's more about the how, right? So that's why he's doing that. Well, she doesn't take it the right way, so she shuts down and then she rejects him. So I tell men, she's not looking for solutions. She's looking for you to listen to her heart. So that's one of the ways. She needs to feel safe before she can trust you with her heart. The other way is to help her take some of those plates that she's juggling in the air, whether it's kids or the house or whatever else. So she's very busy. So helping her out and really being engaged with your children. Mama bears know intuitively how important a father is to those children. And when dads just come home and they ignore the children, or they do their thing, or they don't spend time with their children, she knows that those children need it. So that bonding and that responsibility is so strong with mom. So when dads actually show that they're doing that, it warms her heart because she is so focused on the development of those children. So that's also loving her. The greatest way a husband loves his wife is he stays. He doesn't retreat. He never quits loving her. He might screw up, but he continues to learn how to love her and what she needs, because he is the leader of love. He is the initiator of unity. Who puts his arm out to ask to go for a dance? Who goes down on one knee? He makes the offer. He's the initiator. He's the leader. But he's the leader because he puts her ahead of himself.
That's so interesting.
So he's the leader because he puts himself last. That's why he's the leader.
We're such different creatures, aren't we?
Yes. I always say when God made man, he said it was good. And when he made woman, he said, whoo, man.
Yeah,
not just because she's pretty, because he's going to need her and he's not going to quite understand her.
Well, you've got such a wealth of information here and expertise and experience, and we could go on all day talking about it, but it looks like we're actually out of time. But we just appreciate so much having you on today, Brent.
Thank you very much. It's my passion. And can I share a little poem with you?
Of course.
Okay. And I hope that couples will reach out and give me a call. The poem is, woman was made from man and for man, not from his feet or his head, to be beneath or above, but from his side to walk alongside, under his arm to be protected, near his heart to be loved. And where he is weak, she is strong. And where she is weak, he is strong. Husband and wife are completers, not competers. They're the greatest team between two human beings. And when God is at the top and the center of their lives, they will know how to love one another, their family, their community, and their world.
I love it. Thank you so much. Brent Taylor is a Lethbridge marriage coach and the author of His, Hers, Greatest Need. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.